Good evening, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of the Thrive series. My name is Liz Danley. I'm the Survivorship Events Coordinator at the Masonic Cancer Center, and I'm hosting today with Kaya Verich. She's a nurse clinician with the Cancer Survivorship Program at mHealth Fairview. And on behalf of our entire planning team, we are excited to welcome you to the Fall 2025 Thrive series. Thrive is a collaboration between mHealth Fairview and the Masonic Cancer Center at the University of Minnesota. We are proud to offer 5 sessions this fall, 4 webinars each Tuesday in October, and 1 in-person event at the end of the month. You're welcome to attend any or all sessions, and recordings of our weekly virtual ones will be available on our website. Before we begin, just a few quick notes. Please stay muted during the presentation and use the chat box for comments and questions. We will open it up for live Q&A at the end of the presentation. And if you're a University of Minnesota employee or spouse participating in the Employee Wellbeing Program, we'll share a link in the chat to record your attendance and earn your wellbeing points. Now let's kick off our second session of the 2025 Thrive series. Tonight, we're excited to welcome Dr. Robert Turesky. Dr. Turesky is in the Department of Medicinal Chemistry and holds the inaugural Mason's Chair on Cancer Causation at the University of Minnesota. Thank you, Dr. Turesky, for being here this evening. We're really excited to hear from you.
Can everybody see my slides?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. Give me 1 second to clean up a couple of things. Okay. So thank you very much for the introduction. And I was asked, oh, this hasn't removed. Hold on a second. I was asked to talk about diet and lifestyle factors in cancer risk and prevention. Oops. Okay, so this is a little bit of background of what I plan to talk about today. So I'm going to speak about harmful chemicals in the environment and diet and their potential impact on cancer risk for breast cancer, colorectal, and prostate cancer, and talk about some lifestyle factors also that certainly will contribute to skin cancer, some caveats about using traditional herbal medicines, and then I would like to talk about some beneficial foods and beverages that actually may protect against cancer or lower cancer risk, and emphasize the importance of exercise on cancer reduction. It's important for you all in the audience to note that I am not a medical doctor. I'm a basic research investigator, meaning I study chemicals in the diet environment, how they may damage DNA and protein. And so a lot of the things that I'm going to talk to you about today, if certainly, I hope that many of you are already aware of some of these issues and items, but any potential changes in lifestyle habits or diet and exercise that you're seeking to do to improve your health, it's absolutely essential that you speak to your physician for consultation and advice. So we're exposed continuously in our environment and our diet to low levels of chemicals that are potentially hazardous that contribute to disease risk, including asthma, other diseases, including cancer. We have, these are some acronyms, I'm not going to go into their names, but we have hazardous chemicals through air pollution, gas, exhaust gas from cars. Unfortunately, some places in the country, our water supply is not as clean as it should be, and there are low levels of potential carcinogenic chemicals from industrial waste, for example, that may penetrate some water supplies. Certainly, I hope that everybody in this audience knows that smoking is the worst thing you can do for your health. So please don't smoke. And again, things in our diet, I specialize, one of my specialties is chemicals in cooked red meats or processed meats, and they can also contribute to cancer risk. So, why is this keeps on showing up? Let me try to remove this if I can. I guess I can't. Okay, so how do mutations in cancer occur, and what is chemical carcinogenesis? So this is a little bit of an oversimplification because the development of cancer is a very complex biological phenomenon. But in a simplified explanation of this, we have chemicals in our diet or in our environment. And what happens is once they get into our body, they can latch on to DNA to form what we call as a DNA adduct. And what happens then is, well, in many instances, we have enzymes in our body, like policemen, that are always surveilling things, and they'll remove these lesions. But if some of the adducts escape the repair from these different enzymes, when the cell divides, unfortunately, these adducts can trick the enzymes that help the cell to duplicate and can cause a mutation. And if it's in a critical gene, like a tumor suppressor gene that controls DNA damage, that makes the cell more sensitive to exposure to even more hazardous chemicals. Or if it's in an enzyme that controls how the cell divides and it becomes uncontrolled division, then what happens is after a series of different events, the cell can become cancerous and ultimately develop into a tumor. It's a little bit of an oversimplification, but it gives you the idea of how chemical exposures are hazardous to us. So cancer occurs more often, or more common as we age, and we're all exposed during our lifetime to all sorts of types of DNA damage from chemicals in the diet and the environment. And for that matter, even in our bodies. Many of you have probably heard of free radicals and oxidative stress. Those things can also contribute to DNA damage and ultimately to mutations. So we're all carrying mutations. The million-dollar question is why some of us develop cancers and others don't. So what are some of the risk factors for cancer? Well, firstly, the most significant risk factor still remains tobacco smoking, even though we've known that for over 60 years that tobacco smoking is hazardous for health and causes cancer. Other factors include increased or excess body weight, obesity, lifestyle factors also, such as alcohol consumption, too much exposure to sun cause skin cancer. The diet's a very important factor in health and cancer risk. And this approximation, it's probably wider and larger than 4.2%. But diet is a very important component of health for sure. Bacterial and viral pathogens can contribute to certain types of cancers. And physical inactivity is also very important. It's important to exercise. So it's been estimated that poor diet contributes to over 3 million new cases per year in the United States, over 1.7 million deaths per year, and a tremendous amount of cost. And again, these sugary drinks, these wonderful cupcakes, but are loaded with sugar, are not very healthy for you, nor are the French fries or the fast food burgers. So eat these in moderation. So there are also health disparities among African Americans and whites for certain types of cancers. Often, for many target organs, African Americans are more susceptible or have higher risk for cancers than do whites, including for a blood cancer called multiple myeloma, prostate cancer in men, colorectal cancer, pancreas. And part of this is due to biology and genetics, because we're different. Some of our genes differ, but probably also socioeconomic reasons, and perhaps historically African Americans have not had the proper health care or done as much routine cancer screening as have white men. Hopefully those gaps are narrowing, but there are a number of explanations why there are health disparities. So this is an example of how diet does impact cancer causation, as well as prevention. This is called a migrant study. It was done initially in Japan, and here what we have is breast cancer incidences of women in Japan. It's a little bit, it's about 18, 17 per 100,000 uh, women. And what the epidemiologists did is they examined their offspring who immigrated to the United States, were married to Japanese, and then the second generation of Japanese in the United States. What you can see is the incidence of breast cancer in Japanese are going up as they immigrate to the United States, approaching the levels that occur for Caucasian women in the United States. So what's causing this? It's certainly it's not genetics. Some of the hypotheses are that as women have moved in the States and their offspring start to adapt a more Western diet, that some of the beneficial foods that they ate, such as soy, which contains phytoestrogens, which are protective against breast cancer, perhaps they're eating those types of foods less frequently, and or perhaps they're exposed to newer, different carcinogens that they, through perhaps the diet that they weren't eating generations ago in Japan. And it's actually the opposite trend for stomach cancer for both women and men. And it's very high incidences of stomach cancer in Japan for both sexes. And it's been thought for many years that's because Japanese have historically eaten a lot of salted fish and pickled vegetables, which contain a class of chemical carcinogens known as nitrosamines. These chemicals cause stomach cancer in experimental laboratory animals and are thought to explain the elevated cancer risk in stomach for Japanese. But again, as the first generation, they migrated, moved to live, born in the United States, their incidences drop, and then the second generation is even dropping more. And it's getting closer to that of local born Caucasians. So again, this suggests that perhaps changes in dietary habits are contributing to the decrease with less consumption of these types of foods. And there are other examples of this, for instance, for colorectal cancer and prostate cancer as well. So diet is an important component in various types of cancers and also some protections against certain types of cancers. So let me talk about the International Agency for Research on Cancer, or IARC. This is part of the World Health Organization. It was created over 60 years ago, and it's located in Lyon. It's a beautiful old medieval town in France. And IARC evaluations are based upon epidemiology. That is the study of human diseases, their origins, how they occur, how they spread, and strategies for either containing or preventing them. So each year there are about 3 different topics which are discussed. So one of the first ones was tobacco smoke. Others were use of hair dyes, or the use of many years ago, portable phones and radiation and brain cancer. And I was involved in the one 10 years ago about the safety and health of red and processed meats. These are very important documents, and regulatory and health agencies worldwide rely on IARC's scientific evaluations for legislating drugs and formulating public health policies. So in the United States, the most newer cases that occur are hormone-driven cancer cases, which are breast in women and prostate in men, followed by lung and bronchus, which is still largely attributed to tobacco smoking. And as far as cancer deaths per year, again, lung and bronchus is still number one for both genders. And again, that's still largely attributed to tobacco smoking, followed by breast and prostate cancers, and then colorectal, and then lower amounts of pancreas, and so forth. So I'm going to talk about some of the different risk factors. And unfortunately, the first one I'm going to talk about is alcohol because I love drinking French wine in particular. But alcoholic drinks do contribute to cancer. Multiple organs are impacted by heavy drinking of alcohol, from mouth, oral cavity, throat, larynx cancers to the esophagus. Importantly, in women, uh, alcohol consumption is a risk for breast cancer as well as liver and colorectal cancer. Some large studies that have come out of Europe indicate that 3% of cancers in women and 10% of all cancers in men are attributed to alcohol consumption. So it's thought that there are four ways that alcohol can cause cancer. Firstly, alcohol or ethanol in our body gets metabolized to this reactive intermediate called acetaldehyde. Okay, this chemical is reactive and can latch onto DNA, as I talked about in the introduction, and can result in potential mutations. Other ways that alcohol can contribute to cancer is it can induce oxidative stress. It can damage the cell membrane, generate free radicals, reactive oxygen species that damage DNA and protein and lipids, and that can result in more mutations and increased cell division, which is required for a mutation to become fixed and go down the road to cancer. And so oxidative stress is a second important mechanism. A third mechanism, importantly in women, is that alcohol alters multiple hormones, including estrogen, which is critical in breast cancer control and development as well as in cancer. And so alcohol affects estrogen levels, which alters breast tissue, and again, it can also contribute to DNA damage. And the fourth mechanism, it's thought that if alcohol is consumed with various types of foods that have cancer-causing agents or tobacco, some of these chemicals get more readily absorbed in the bile, in the oral cavity or in the stomach. And so if the carcinogens become more available, then they can increase DNA damage and cancer risk that way. So what are some of the risk factors for breast cancer for women? Well, first of all, family history is very important. Um, Gene mutations, there are some of us are born with mutations in certain genes. And for instance, Ashkenazi Jews have a mutation in a gene that's called BRCA, which is a protein that surveys DNA damage and tries to repair it. So there's a mutation already in that gene and it's not functioning properly. Women who are exposed to hazardous chemicals and have this mutation are already at a higher risk. Other factors are largely driven by hormonal, late childbearing, early menstruation, prolonged use of oral contraceptives, hormone replacement therapy, and increased breast density is another risk factor. So some women have their breasts are more dense, meaning they have more glandular tissue. It's the glandular tissue or the epithelial cells where cancer originates, and women with dense breasts have higher amounts of these glandular cells in their breasts, and thus they are at higher risk if they get DNA damage there because there's more DNA that can potentially get damaged than women that have more fatty tissue. So that's another factor that needs to be taken into account. And as I mentioned, alcohol intake. So what is considered uh, well, first of all, what's considered one alcoholic drink, and is there a safe amount that you can drink? So those of you who are not knowledgeable in alcohol and what's considered one drink, I put this up on the slide here. One drink is considered about 1 can of beer or a large glass of malt liquor or a glass of red wine or white wine or a shot of whiskey. And the data from multiple epidemiology studies indicates that if women have 2 drinks per day, over their lifetime, about 4 more women will develop breast cancer. It goes up as you drink more alcohol. And in total, 5 more women out of 100 would develop cancer if they have 2 drinks per day, every day, a week, for years. And for men, it's about 3 out of 100. So, what are some of the breast cancer risk factors in prevention? So, again, I highlighted some of those: family history and genetics. Again, as we get older, we're more susceptible to various types of cancers. I talked about breast density, and there are differences in ethnicity. So, African American women also have higher risk for breast cancer than do Caucasians. So there are some things that we can do to lower those risks, including maintaining a healthy weight, being physically active, and minimize alcohol consumption. I don't want to scare people and tell people that they can't have anything to drink, but clearly there's data that's showing that moderate and heavy drinkers do have an elevated risk of breast cancer, and you should be aware of that. So next, diet or dietary factor I'd like to talk about is processed and cooked red meat, and it's linked to colorectal cancer. And again, I was part of monographs on this topic that was done already 10 years ago. So meats defined 2 different ways. We have processed meats like ham, sausages, salami, that's preserved through salting, curing with nitrite, which is not very healthy for you, smoking, fermentations, and these have been historically done to enhance flavor and improve preservation. And for red meat, unprocessed mammalian tissues such as beef, veal, pork, lamb, mutton, horse, and goat meat, frozen meats are red meats. So this is the farmers market along the Saône River in Lyon, France. And these are some photos of the farmers market, which is in the old part of town, very close to where IARC is, and it's the most amazing food market in the world I've ever been to. The food, the fruits, the pastry, the bread is unbelievable, as is also their red meats and their prosciutto ham and their sausages, salami are just out of this world. And I must confide that I did eat some when I was over there. And I'm just telling you that this is wonderful food, but this is not stuff that you should be eating every day. You need a more balanced and moderate diet. So, what are some of the mechanisms of DNA damage that occurs in colorectal tissue by chemicals in meat? So, again, we have processed meats like salami or bacon that actually has some preformed nitrosamine compounds, and we ingest those. And also the processed meat, when it's in your stomach and it's digesting with the acid and the enzymes, there's also nitrite there, and you can also form these nitroso compounds that actually get into the colorectal tract and can latch onto DNA to cause mutations. In red meat, in particular, heme, which is responsible for the color, well, it's from blood, it's responsible for the color red, that also can react with nitrite in the gut to generate reactive intermediates that will also form DNA adducts linked to mutations. And then some of the compounds that I work with a lot that form in cooked meats also can get metabolized in the body, in the gut, and react with DNA to form these adducts that can result in mutations. So there are a number of different ways that red meat and processed meat can contribute to colorectal cancer. Now I'm going to show what's a little bit of epidemiology, and I'll try to explain this. There are 8 different studies that were epidemiology studies that were combined and further evaluated. And this is called the forest plot. And what this is showing you, there's a scale here, it's called relative risk. So 1 is, if you wish, is baseline. Anything that's to the right is positive, it means it's an increase in risk. Anything to the left means it's lower, it's a decreased risk. And what these studies combined and evaluated showed is that for every 100 grams of red meat that you eat per day, your relative risk for developing colorectal cancer is 17% higher. In the case of processed meats, this is actually 50 grams, so that's less meat consumption per day, but the risk is even higher. It's about 18%. So there have been many other studies too that consistently show that frequent consumption of red meats and processed meat does indeed increase the risk of colorectal cancer. And some of the studies that I've been involved in, it's been shown that in some instances, the risk for colorectal cancer in red meat is more important if you eat your meats well done. Okay. And so this is just some photos of meat that's been on a grill. And those meats that are cooked well done have about 10 times more of these carcinogenic heterocyclic aromatic amines or polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons than do those meats that are cooked at medium or medium rare. So I used to like my meat well done, but I won't eat it that way anymore. I will eat it medium to medium rare, so I'm ingesting less of these hazardous chemicals. And so cook it this, if you're using a grill, cook it this way. Don't cook it that way because a lot of the carcinogens that form initially on the surfaces of the cooked meat, not in the interior of medium or medium rare meat. But when you cook it well done, not only is it on the surface, but the temperature of the cooking and the internal temperature of the meat gets higher, and that catalyzes formation of these compounds. So one take-home message is don't eat your meats burnt. Eat them medium to medium rare, not well done. Same, again, I don't want to be a killjoy, but the same thing for bacon. You should limit your intake of bacon. If you're going to eat bacon, it's safer to eat it medium than well done or very well done because the levels of certain carcinogens, they're going to go up as you increase the temperature. So this is a much safer way of eating your bacon. So, all right, so how much can I really eat? What is the epidemiology and what does IARC say? Well, just to give you some examples like I showed with the alcohol consumption, one hot dog, and I like to use grams instead of ounces. One hot dog is about 45 grams. A ham sandwich, depending upon the slice and thickness of your ham, is about 57 to 113 grams. So what the American Institute of Cancer Research, well, actually, they don't want us to eat any processed meat if we can. They say there's no level that's actually safe, which I think maybe is a little bit too stringent, but you should really be limiting your amount of processed meats. And they also advocate for eating no more than 3 portions of what's the equivalent of 3/4 pounders per week or 3 Philly steak sandwiches. Okay? This is fairly stringent conditions, but they have based this based upon a lot of the epidemiology data. So let me give you some comparisons. So when this IARC monographs came out quite some time ago, 10 years ago, this group in the UK, the Vegan Street Com, I thought did some very irresponsible advertising. They claimed that the World Health Organization stated that eating processed meats is as much as a cancer risk as smoking cigarettes. That's totally incorrect. That is wrong. Right? What IARC stated is that they graded both processed meat and tobacco smoking as human carcinogens. They did not say anything about the potency or the actual relative risk. And I think that scared a lot of people away. So is eating bacon really bad? Is smoking tobacco? The answer is no. But so this is baseline referral for colorectal cancer in about 5% of people. And if you eat 2 strips of bacon per day, your risk for colorectal cancer is going to go from 5% to about 5.9. If you eat 4 strips per day for 40 years or so, it's going to go up to 6.8 and so forth. And they calculate if you eat 10 strips per day, it's going to double. I don't know anybody who eats 10 strips of bacon per day. You'll probably die of a stroke or a heart attack first. That's just crazy. But these are the numbers that they generated. So if you compare that, though, to smoking a pack of cigarettes for 40 years, which increases your risk for developing lung cancer, that's about an increase by 30-fold. Now, if you eat 2 strips of bacon a day, it's about 1.18-fold. So it's much lower. I want to emphasize it's not zero, though. There is some increased incidence if you have 2 strips a day. So, look, I still love bacon, but I won't eat it every day. I'll have a brunch on a Sunday and I'll take 2 strips, but that's it. Until they can figure out how to get rid of the carcinogens that are in the bacon. Other things, barbecue season's closing down, but you should be aware that if you're grilling, um, you should avoid, I mean, it smells good, but you should avoid breathing in all that smoke because these aerosols are containing some of the carcinogens that you're generating on the surfaces of these cooked meats. So you want to go against the wind. Try not to breathe it in, even if it smells good. And again, don't overcook the meat. It's better to eat it medium or medium rare. Or if you flip the meat more often and use marinades, you will minimize or lower the formation of some of those carcinogens on the surface of the grilled meats. And that stuff, that charred black stuff on the grill is probably not very good either. You should wear gloves when you're cleaning your grill. Sorry, did I miss something on that? No. Okay. So actually, there's been, in the last 20 years, an increase of colorectal cancer in younger adults. When we think of colorectal cancer, in my generation, we're starting to worry about those types of things in our 50s and 60s and 70s. But over the last 2 decades, there's been increases in colorectal cancer in younger adults under 40. And we still don't know the reasons why, but certain factors, including obesity, and we eat a lot of packaged foods that are packaged in this little deposits of microplastics that we are ingesting that unfortunately are getting lodged in all our bodies and all different organs that can cause some inflammation. There are these fluorinated pollutants that have been on the market now for 20, 30 plus years. It's thought that some of these compounds and lifestyle factors of overweight are increasing the risks of colorectal cancer. And also these different people are more obese now than they were 34 years ago. And the bacterial flora in our gut has changed. And there are certain bacteria, we have a whole ecosystem of different bacteria in our gut. It's normal. We need it for health. I mean, it's a symbiotic relationship. But if the bacterial flora gets perturbed, and there's some hypothesis that the bacterial flora in younger adults has been perturbed, and certain types of E. coli, which are in our intestines, produce this genotoxic agent colibactin, or toxic agent colibactin. It's kind of like chemical or biowarfare. It's trying to kill off other bacteria so it can have a greater part of surviving in the GI tract. But this colibactin can damage DNA, and it's thought it may be contributing to cancer in younger adults. So these are areas of still of active interest and still needs to be clarified, in addition to the role of meat diets. So let's talk about prostate cancer now. Again, there are risk factors here, including age. African Americans have a higher risk. Again, there's questions about genetics, environment, lifestyle, including red meat, and chronic inflammation. So the question is, what chemicals in cooked meat cause prostate cancer? And we believe it's chemicals that are formed in well-done cooked meat that are the highest risk factors. And one of those chemicals I talked to you about before, it may be contributing to colorectal cancer, but we think it may be also contributing to prostate cancer. This chemical called PhIP causes prostate cancer in experimental laboratory animals and forms of well-done cooked meats. We developed an assay. When you eat meats, small amounts of this carcinogen gets into your bloodstream and goes through systemic circulation through your entire body, including hair follicles. And a small amount of it gets entrapped in the hair. We developed a way that when someone gets a haircut, we can take their hair and digest it, break it open, and we can see someone who's eaten PhIP. People who eat Fifth means they've eaten well done cooked meats because it's not vegetarians don't have it in their hair. And what we did is we did a study here at the University of Minnesota with Dr. Waite, and we looked at prostate cancer patients versus patients who had bladder cancer and also patients who had benign hyperplasia, means inflammation but non-cancerous. Bladder cancer patients did not have prostate cancer either, but what we had seen is that those individuals who had prostate cancer had higher levels of this carcinogen in their hair. So assuming that their diets haven't changed, this cohort of prostate cancer patients is exposed to more of this carcinogen, meaning they eat more well-done cooked meat than did people with bladder cancer or hyperplasia. Now, that does not prove that this chemical causes prostate cancer, but it supports some of the epidemiology that says, yes, it's well-done cooked meat that increases the risk for aggressive prostate cancer. So we're hoping to do more work on this on the diet, this chemical, to further understand if it is contributing to human prostate cancer. Go ahead. I'm having problems with. All right. So let me give some take-home messages on processed and red meat. Um, Limit your consumption of processed meat. If you like processed meat, try to find meat that's not cured with nitrite, either chemical nitrite or celery or other vegetables like celery, which do contain nitrite. Avoid eating well done charred meat. It's safer to eat meat medium to medium rare. It's important to have varied diets. Don't eat meat all the time. Eat fish, poultry, plant-based diets. Eat plenty of cruciferous vegetables. Changing the public's perception about meat and healthy diets is a long-term goal. We've been cooking meat over a fire for many years now, and I think in prehistoric time, men were more worried about being killed by a saber-toothed tiger than they were of developing prostate or colorectal cancer. So now that we have a much longer lifespan, it's really important to recognize how you prepare your meats can impact cancer risk. Just a few lifestyle factors I want to talk about. A lot of people like to tan. Be careful about tanning. You can damage DNA in your skin and get skin cancers. These salon lamps you should not be using. And again, the mechanism is that the UV rays will damage the DNA in your skin to cause mutations that can ultimately result in melanoma. Other things, a lot of people are taking supplements or homeopathic medicines, traditional herbal medicines. Got to be really careful about that. We work on traditional herbal medicines that are used commonly in Western Europe and Asia, which actually have hazardous chemicals that cause cancer of the kidney, bladder, and liver. You've got to be really careful about using traditional Chinese herbal medicines. And there are other medicines here in the United States, like St. John's worts. I'm not claiming that they cause cancer, but they affect many things in your body. They affect enzymes in your liver, which are key in the efficacy of various prescription drugs. If you're taking herbal products or you're taking homeopathic medicines, it's really important that you talk to your doctor about this because it could impact efficacy of a wide range of drugs, including chemotherapeutics. I've talked about a lot of hazardous things, but there are beneficial things in our diet too. A lot of cruciferous vegetables. There's documented data that it can protect the various types of cancers. Fruits, raspberries, blueberries, garlic, coffee, green tea, even red wine for some types of cancers in moderation, not breast cancer, but for instance, there is documented data suggesting that 1 to 2 glasses of wine or alcohol per day could actually help diminish colorectal cancer. But after 2 glasses a day, it goes up. So you got to be really careful about that. That is still somewhat controversial. It's probably not the best way to protect yourself against colorectal cancer or lower your rates. Eat cruciferous vegetables and a lot of fruits. Don't smoke. So again, there were studies that have come out recently showing that having good servings of cruciferous vegetables could possibly reduce your risk for colorectal cancer by about 20%. Coffee, there's documented data showing that coffee is protective against liver cancer, endometrial cancer. It may also have some protective effects against oral cancers. Some evidence for colon cancer and prostate cancer by drinking 2 to 4 cups per day. Exercise is very important. This is a study that came out recently in the New England Journal of Medicine this past summer for patients who had colorectal cancer with adjuvant chemotherapy. They split the patients into 2 groups. They were both educated about the benefits of health is for exercising. And one group was very closely monitored and coached to ensure that they had exercise consistently 5 days a week. And what you can see is after 5 years of post-surgery and chemotherapy, there's about 6.5% differences in disease-free survival. Those who actively exercised had less disease reoccurrence. And the overall survival at 8 years also showed those who exercised had about a 7% higher overall survival. So exercise is very important. And there are other studies that highlight in the guidelines by the U.S. Department of Health and Services. There's evidence not only for colorectal cancer, but for bladder, breast, endometrium, esophageal, kidney, and stomach cancer. It's thought that vigorous exercise, meaning brisk walking of 4 miles per day, 5 days a week, will demonstrate to have some more beneficial effects, protective effects. But even lower activity in any pace is strongly recommended to reduce cancer and replacing sedentary time, which we know increases cancer risk. So, in summary, eat a healthy and varied diet that includes cruciferous vegetables and fruits. Minimize eating processed meats. And again, based upon the World Health Organization, the American Institute of Cancer Research, they recommend about 3 portions of beef per week. Don't cook your meat well done. I tell in more talks I give where I talk more about chemistry, I tell my layperson audience, if you don't understand anything I talked about, don't burn your meats and don't eat your bacon too crispy. All right, you'll already lessen your exposure to some of these chemicals. Minimize alcohol intake. I must confess, I love red wine. I do have a glass, well, 2 glasses with my wife for dinner. Life is about choices also. We all have choices to make in life. Exercise, don't smoke. And healthy eating is about balance. Enjoying great foods is part of enjoying life. But use common sense. Try to do everything in moderation. And I hope some of the things that I talked to you about today can help you to reduce some of your exposures to harmful chemicals in the diet and environment. And I've had a lot of luck in my 13 years here. I've had some wonderful collaborations. And I particularly would also, from NIH for funding, but also I really want to acknowledge the Minnesota Masonic Charities and their creation of the Masonic Chair, which has helped me in the type of research I do in cancer causation. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'll try my best to answer them. But again, I'm not a medical doctor or a clinical oncologist. And if there are questions up that alley, I'm going to refrain and tell you that you should speak to your doctor. They're the ones who really know what's best for you.
So it looks like there's a number of questions in the chat, and I had put mine in there as well. But I think you plainly stated for breast cancer, 0 glasses of red wine is the optimum choice.
Well, that's what the American Institute of Cancer Research states, and that's what the World Cancer Research Fund in the United Kingdom states, there's a large number of epidemiology studies that show that even a glass of wine seems to be the threshold limit. And again, these are all estimates. I'm not an epidemiologist either. And
Sure.
there is some fluctuation, but clearly ethanol, it's a risk factor for breast cancer in women. And there are many studies now that show that. So again, we all have to make choices in life. My wife, she'll drink 2 glasses of wine with me, a white. She's European. She comes from France, Switzerland. There's a tradition for,
Sure.
enjoying, at least in our generations, imbibing in wine. And we have it with meals. It relaxes us. It's an enjoyment. But the take-home message is that too much wine is, or I say wine, but when I'm really drinking,
So,
too much alcohol is not a good thing.
okay, so I'm trying to weigh the intricacies of the benefits of the polyphenols or whatever in the red grape versus I've never really even liked beer, but beer has a lot less alcohol.
Right.
So if you're just out with some friends, do you know what I'm asking? Like,
Well,
is it the
I,
alcohol?
it is the alcohol, all right. And unfortunately, the studies that I'm familiar with, they haven't broken it down to individuals who say drink vodka versus those who drink red wine versus
Okay,
those who drink beer. They broke it down to the number of grams of alcohol. And if I showed you that slide with a
right.
can of beer versus
Yeah,
I must be frank. I do try to rationalize. Red wine does have a lot of polyphenolics, and those are antioxidants. They may be protective, and that may be one of the reasons why some of the epidemiology studies suggest that 1 to 2 glasses of well, I say alcohol, but I'm saying wine now, to mix them up, does have some protective effects against colorectal cancer, but not breast
sure.
cancer. And so
Sure.
part of
Yeah,
it happens to do with what target organ we're talking about.
yeah,
But they're talking about the amount of alcohol. And I don't want to start equating saying this is just a personal opinion. I don't know if it's true or not. I would think that having 1 glass of red wine with plenty of antioxidants, polyphenols, is probably
sure.
more beneficial for you than having a shot of whiskey
Oh gosh,
or a
yeah.
margarita.
So many bad things in that scenario.
Yeah, yeah.
What about diet? It looks like a lot of us had questions about diet. I don't even know what an alkaline diet is, but I know that I'm attempting a ketogenic diet and wondering if
I
the downside of red meat would lead me to plant-based options.
I'm not a nutritionist, so I must confide. I really wouldn't want to answer that question. But
Okay.
again, the health of health advocacy groups are strongly promoting plant-based diets over red meat,
Okay.
or certainly for processed meat. And again, I can't emphasize that eating a lot of cruciferous vegetables, a big bowl of salad with broccoli and sprouts in it, will help protect. There's a lot of mechanistic data, and certainly that's beneficial. So lower the red meat content.
Hmm. Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Turesky. Very interesting information. Like Amy said, we did have a lot of questions in the chat, so I'll try and go through a few more of them. And like we all understand, if it's not a question that you're able to answer, please feel free to let us know. We will do our best to go through some of these. One of the questions I saw this question that was answered near the end. There was one question about, is nitrate-free bacon okay? And I did see in one of your slides that it's better But do you want to expand on that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And I would love to do some research on that. There have been so many epidemiology studies showing for processed meats that there's strong evidence for colorectal cancer risk, and it's thought that it's due to nitrite preserved meats, but there's not a lot of data in the literature. In fact, I think there's none to my knowledge on meats that are not processed meats that are not cured with nitrite. And then, when I talk about nitrite, I'm talking about sodium nitrite. This is a salt that they throw in with the meat when they're preserving it. And some vendors also, they say it's nitrite free, or sodium nitrite free. But if you look at the package, it will say there'd be some celery powder in there or something. Celery contains a lot of nitrite and nitrate, so it's not synthetic. And they say, well, it's natural, but that doesn't matter. It's still nitrite. So some companies are trying to dupe you, thinking that, well, it's not nitrite, it's nitrite free, but it's not. There's not been enough studies to investigate that, to claim whether processed meat that's not nitrite treated is safer. I would say I doubt that it's worse, because some of the preformed nitrosamines not going to be there. But the other thing that we don't know is once you eat the meat and you're digesting it in your stomach, our mouth has nitrite and nitrite in it. It goes in the stomach, and it may be that some of the components in the processed meats, which would be there irrespective of whether it's treated with nitrite or not, you could form nitrosamines in your stomach, and you still could contribute to cancer risk. This is an area which needs to be studied. It's not known. So I would say that non-nitrite meat is probably safer, but I don't know by how much.
Okay.
Yeah. There was another one. Do the carcinogens on meat come from the heat or from the chemicals from the briquettes or fuel when you're grilling meat?
That's a great question. Okay, well, actually, they come from both. So some of it, I'm going to talk about red meat for the moment, okay? So red meat, when you cook meat and you roast it or char it, there are chemical reactions that occur that develop the flavors and aromas that everybody craves for when they cook the meat. And so those chemicals are coming from the meat itself, obviously, because you're cooking it. However, unfortunately, some of the same chemical reactions or some of the intermediates, when you break down the proteins to amino acids and the sugars and the creatinine, which is a muscle reserve in tissue, the same chemical reactions that produce the flavors and aromas can produce these chemicals called heterocyclic aromatic amines that are carcinogens. And when you're doing high temperature cooking, I mean, you can do this on a pan, but if you're doing higher temperature cooking on a grill, it's the surface of the meat that has the highest temperature, and that's where most of the reaction occurs. So the more well done you cook the meat, you'll form these carcinogens not only the surface of the meat, but in the interior as the temperature escalates, goes up. Now, things like polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, or PAHs, those really don't form in pan fried meat. But if you're cooking your meat on a gas grill or charcoal, what happens is when you cook your meat, the fat starts to melt and it drips onto the charcoal flames and it starts to hiss, and then the smoke comes back up and gets absorbed onto the meat. That crusty stuff, it tastes good, but what you're doing is the chemical reactions, the super high temperature that's required for benzopyrene or these other polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, most of it occurs on that charcoal residue that's burning red hot and it's volatilizing it back up onto the meat. I don't know, did that answer the question? Kind of?
I think so. Yeah, I will let the person who, if they are still here, follow up if they need to. There were a couple questions on the theme of like your body repairing damage. So there was um, one about does the body repair damage already done by alcohol if you stop drinking, or does it just reduce future risk? And a similar question, does intermittent fasting or like a 3 to 5 day fasting allow regeneration of abnormal cells? I don't know if that's um, something you'd be able to answer, but there were a few different.
Listen, I'll answer the last question first. I don't think intermittent fasting, and I don't have proof of this. This is just in my own expertise. I don't think that would make any difference on DNA repair. Okay, yeah, it may help you lose weight, which is good, but if you binge eat afterwards, you're probably defeating the purpose of it. But as far as DNA repair, so there are different ways, there are different enzymes in our body that repair DNA damage. So when a chemical latches on to DNA to form an addict, we have enzymes in our body that like proofread that DNA. And when an addict forms, it kind of perturbs the structure of the DNA. And so these proofreading enzymes, if they see that perturbation in structure, they'll clip out the portion of the DNA that has the carcinogen, and they'll put a patch in and repair it. All right. And afterwards, if there are other types of damage, there are other, I don't want to, it gets too detailed. There are other types of repair processes that occur. But if you have an addict that is formed, and when the cell divides, if you have a mutation, that's at that stage, it's kind of fixed. And that's why we have super efficient enzymes in our body to get rid of most of these lesions. That's why there's some people that have genetic defects in some of these enzymes, why they're more susceptible, because they can't repair them. But we have multiple different types of overlapping enzymes that will do these repair. But the key is that once the cell divides, if that mutation occurs, it's fixed there. And there are other processes that have further down the line that have to occur for that cell to become cancerous. But at some point, that's why with aging, there's higher instances of cancer, because we're getting more hits in our cells as we get older and older and older. So again, I hope that partially answered it.
Yeah, yeah, that was great. We have probably time for just about one more question. We had one come in actually before your presentation, but I thought it was a good one. If a survivor could commit to only one diet change, even if it's significant, what would you recommend?
I want them to speak to their doctor, but I would
Yeah,
probably suggest that alcohol should be restricted. The types of chemicals I work with in cooked meat are present at one part out of a million or a billion. I mean, alcohol is present at percent, it's 10% of 12% of a glass of wine. And fortunately, it's a weak carcinogen. All right. I mean, all the things I talked to you about today, again, I don't want people to get scared. All the things I talked to you about today, they're all very weak compared to tobacco smoking. It's really low. It's not really, it's low, much lower. It's still significant. And, if you eat well done cooked meats, if you eat a lot of bacon, if you're not exercising, and if you're drinking a lot of alcohol, these things start to add up. But probably alcohol, I would say, would probably be the first thing. But again, people, they need to speak to their physicians. They may have, I suspect they would say that, but I'm not a doctor, so
sure.
it's a little bit subjective position of mine.
Yeah, yeah. Dr. Turesky, I just want to thank you for your time this evening, for answering so many questions. I know that we do have some questions we weren't able to get to. If you are one of those that we didn't get an answer for, please feel free to email us at survivorship@umn.edu. You will also,
I'd send them along to me. I'll be if I have answers to them,
yeah.
I'll be happy to respond.
Sounds good. Sounds good. For those attending tonight, you'll receive an email shortly with a quick survey, just to help us continuously improve our programs at the Masonic Cancer Center. We hope to see you next week when we will have Dr. Ann Blaze, who will be talking to us about the cancer dilemma, balancing cancer treatment, toxicities, and outcomes. Dr. Turesky, thank you again for your time tonight. It was really wonderful to have you here.
My pleasure.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right. Have a nice evening, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.